First plant I want to talk about is this plant, Iochroma, or sometimes aniscus, but Iochroma correctly, australe. This is one selection called Good Blue. This is a kind of a semi-shrubby plant to a small tree, usually about 3 to 6 feet tall, but can grow to up to 10 feet tall. You can limit up as a tree if you live somewhere where it's almost subtropical or very protected. It's a little iffy here in central North Carolina. We've got it in a pretty protected spot. We've got the building, we've got trees above it, so it's in a pretty protected spot. Typically for us, it has been dying back to the ground, but this winter it didn't die back to the ground because we didn't have much of a winter, which is nice. In very mild climates, it'll actually be kind of semi-evergreen and try and go. And as soon as it warms up, if it hadn't died back, it'll start flowering, and it'll keep flowering more or less through most of summer. As long as it's warm out, it'll flower. Iochroma australe typically has white to very, very pale blue flowers. This one, nice blue, that's why it's called Good Blue. What does that flower look like?
Datura.
Pardon? Trumpet. Kind of like a petunia flower. It's in that same family, the Solanaceae family, so same family as potatoes and tomatoes and petunias and the big Rumansia with the big angel's trumpets, and the flower is very similar to those. Like those other plants, probably most parts of this plants are poisonous. I don't know that for sure, but I sure wouldn't eat it because most of those are pretty poisonous, except for the fruits on tomatoes and peppers, the roots on potatoes. It's kind of an arching plant, but like I said, you can kind of limit up. Really likes a fair amount of sun, but tolerates sunshade. You get the best growth in sun, but here where it's a little marginal, high shade will protect it from some of the real cold. But neat plant, just a really very cool plant. This is about the best that it's looked so far for us. That mild winter was good for some plants anyway. Questions or thoughts about it? All right. This is one of those plants from Argentina, from South America, that we can grow. A lot of our solanaceous plants are from South America. That's where the bulk of them are.
What do you mean by solanaceous?
They're in the Solanaceae family. So that's like petunias and tomatoes and potatoes. People think of potatoes from Ireland, but they're actually from the Andes Mountains in South America. Tobacco is from South America as well. Now this is a very special peony. This is a hybrid peony between the tree peonies and the herbaceous peonies. It's got the beautiful name Bartzella. I'm not quite sure where that came from, but go figure. These hybrids between the tree and the herbaceous peonies, there's been a long history of people trying to cross these, and it's proven very, very, very difficult to do. This is one that was bred in 1980 by a gentleman in Wisconsin. It didn't flower until 1986, so he wasn't quite sure what he had. But fully mature plants will flower pretty quickly if you get a nice good size, 1 gallon, 2 gallon, even better. They'll flower pretty quickly. It grows like a herbaceous peony. It dies all the way back to the ground, so you don't have the stems like a tree peony. But the foliage is a little more reminiscent of a tree peony than a herbaceous peony, and the flowers are more like a tree peony. Great big huge flowers. Also has very, very sturdy stems. You get those beating rains, and sometimes the herbaceous peonies kind of want to lay down, or they have these big, humongous flowers and they don't want to hold up. This thing, really nice and sturdy stems, so it's very nice. Really big, very doubled yellow flowers. You can see there's a little bit of red, especially when the flowers are just opening. Some red down at the base. They call it flaming at the base of the flower petals. Exceptionally heavy bloomer. It'll flower. It'll often a really mature plant will have 60, 70, 80 flowers on this thing. I mean, just, it is astounding. This is a relatively new plant, and you can see we've got flowers that are already going to seed here, flowers that are the petals are shattering on there. One's fully open, one's just have just opened up, and the ones that are still buds that are just now showing color. We may even have some buds in here that are still emerging. So you'll get flowering over a little bit more of an extended period than you do with most other peonies. And if you can imagine having, you know, 60, 80 flowers on this thing, all kind of opening up over a period of several weeks, that's a pretty spectacular peony. You're not going to get them cheap because they're slow to produce. They take a lot of space in the nursery. You know, usually you get them sold at close to flowering size, so it takes a while before they can actually sell them to you. So you do pay for these kind of things. They're usually in the $45 to $75 range. They're slowly becoming a few more of these hybrid peonies available. They're hard to come by, and you'll pay a whole lot of money for the very, very newest ones, because this is one of the original, but still pretty spectacular. And that really nice yellow is hard to get in a peony anyway.
Mark, are they on the market anywhere in this area?
Plant Delights.
But they're sold out for the season.
Yeah, they're sold out, but Plant Delights does carry them, and they are selling flowering size plants, large plants. They're not in the little 4-inch pots. They're selling full-size plants, and I don't know what they are. They're probably $60, $70.
I think they were
60.
80.
So.
Chadwick Arboretum sold them at a plant sale, and 2 master gardeners decided they would buy one and divide it.
There you go. You can do that. I mean,
they did it in the spring and they lost the investment.
Oh, did
so now they buy and divide in the fall.
Yeah, you want to divide in the fall. You'll often, after you divide, especially these hybrids, they often won't flower for a year or two right after the year or two after you divide them. Even if you get a good-sized plant and divide it into 2 pretty good-sized pieces, they often won't flower. But that's okay. You know, it does, you know, take your investment a little farther if you split it with somebody.
How do the blooms handle rain? Do they turn brown or?
No, you know, we've had quite a bit of rain. No, this really holds up to the rain very well, of course, and holds up to the heat very well also, which a lot of the peonies don't. So they don't shatter that quickly. Really a very good plant.
How big will it get?
How big will it get? About 3 feet by 3 feet. So it'll get a little bit taller than it is now ultimately, a little bit wider, but it's like a big herbaceous peony. Other questions?
What's the hardiness range?
What's the hardiness range?
Yeah,
you know, I don't know how. You probably wouldn't want to go much warmer than a zone 8, a hot zone 8 garden, a southeastern zone 8. But then they go up to zone 4 easily. I don't know beyond that. You know, yeah, polar bears will get them after you get cold than that. But yeah, they're very cold tolerant. Okay. The next one is one that we actually offered in our members only plant sale. For those of you who are not members, we do have a fall plant sale that's only for members. It's a pre-order plant sale, so you get to pick your plants and pay for them and then come pick them up a week or so later. And this is one that we offered. It's a leopard plant called Farfugium japonicum kaimandaki. The Japanese really love Farfugium, and they have a lot of different selections. This is one that the new growth emerges almost pure white with some little green flecks in it. As the leaves age over the summer, they'll get more and more green in there, so that they're green with just some white flecks, and then ultimately almost solid green. People get disturbed when they get new plants often, because often the first year or so that they're in the ground, you don't get a whole lot of white, and people think they have duds. In fact, Tim, our research technician, when we first got this, he said, I don't think we got the right plant. We may be in trouble because we sold it to all those people and it's solid green. I said, just wait till next year. And you can see what it did, you know, this spring. It came out bright white. In the fall, it gets yellow daisy flowers on there, and then those go to little puffy white seed heads. I actually like the seed heads. I think they're kind of nice when you get a big clump of the Farfugium going. It is an evergreen plant, which is nice. Looks best with this if you cut off the old leaves before the new ones come up in the spring. You know, leave those green leaves up for most of the winter, and then when things start warming up and new growth's going to start coming, go ahead and cut it back so you get that burst of really nice foliage. Like a lot of evergreen perennials, it looks really good. Those evergreen leaves look really good all winter, and you're tempted to think, I'll just leave the evergreen foliage because it still looks really good. And then the new growth comes out and you realize that the old growth looks pretty ratty compared to the new stuff. Middle of winter it looks pretty good, but in spring not so much. So go ahead and cut it out before the new growth comes up, or else you have to cut around it. But really easy plant, best in a little bit of shade. It'll tolerate very damp soils. You can really use it in a kind of a rain garden situation, but it is pretty drought tolerant as well. It's a tough plant. Now this one is so much white on the leaves that you really do want to give it some shade so it doesn't burn. But kind of part shade, this woodland edge, this is perfect kind of situation for it. Yeah.
Do other Farfugiums bloom?
Do other Farfugiums bloom? Yes. Not always. A lot of times Farfugiums don't bloom well. But yeah, they flower. They all flower in the fall.
How big?
How big does it get? The foliage, the clump of foliage can get to be about 24 inches tall and maybe a little bit wider. It'll offset a little bit, make a large clump over time, not terribly quickly. And then the flowers can get up to maybe 30 inches tall. Other questions?
Will they stay evergreen farther north, and will they live in zone 4 or 5? Probably not.
Zone 4 or 5, I don't know. Somebody may be able to answer that, how far north they grow. Certainly zone 6, where they are not deciduous, but not really what I'd call evergreen either. They just look ratty. Zone 5. They can go 5, okay. And Farfugium seem, if they're happy, they will seed around a little bit in the garden, not outside the garden. But I've had great gardeners who for years have said, Farfugium don't set seed, they don't set viable seed, they don't grow, but they do. Just they have to be in just the right spot. You have a question? Kind's my favorite? Oh, it depends on the day of the week. The third to last plant right now is my favorite, but the Farfugiums, there's my favorite right now, and again, like I said, it always changes. There's one called Can that has a white rim around, a thin white edge to each leaf, kind of goldish white edge to each leaf. Not to be confused with Argentium, but that one's really neat because you get that nice leaf shape and that white edge, whitish gold edge around the edge of each leaf.
Is that the same plant that's in the Japanese?
There is, yes, there's another Kaimandaki in the Japanese garden.
I saw them on Sunday, yeah.
And then there's also in the Japanese garden, there's Farfugium japonicum aureomaculatum, which has yellow spots on green leaves.
That's the one.
Yeah, that's why it's called leopard plant, because that's the species is really just solid green. But what you almost always see in gardens is the aureomaculatum with the yellow spots on the leaves.
How about deer?
How about deer?
What about them?
I think they ate all of that.
I think rabbits got mine.
I can't answer that. I would think it would not be deer's first choice, but I don't know.
How about does?
Pardon?
How about does?
You know, I don't know. I don't garden much with deer, so my experience is that they eat everything. They'll eat some things first. They'll eat some things second, but they eat everything. Next plant we have is an evergreen shrub. This is Fatsia japonica Murakumo nishiki. Another one of those plants that the Japanese love, so that a lot of them have Japanese names. Fatsia are great plants because they are very, very shade tolerant and very, very drought tolerant. And they root easily, but unfortunately they grow pretty slow, and there isn't a lot of wood to cut to make new plants. So something like this, Murakumu Nishiki, which has been in the country for quite a few years, is virtually impossible to get, just because you get a plant and there isn't much to cut on. Now you have something like this, you can do 1,000,000 cuttings on, or Japanese maple, bunch of cuttings that you can graft. But with something like this, it's a very stout stem, and so there isn't much to cut there. You could whack off the top and get 2 cuttings there, and since ours is kind of laying down like this, you could get a couple little small ones off there, but it'd be difficult. If you come for the propagation workshop, don't take cuttings of this.
You would notice.
That's right. That's what we'll notice. That's our guiding rule, is you shouldn't be able to tell. Murakumu Nishiki is really nice. It has kind of a 3 colors of green in the leaf, almost white in the center often, and that shows up even more as the season progresses, and then a light green, and then a darker green around the edge. Holds that variegation very well. Some plants like that Farfugium lose the variegation. This one keeps it all year through, and keeps looking good all during the winter. When it gets large enough to flower, it'll send up a little kind of Sputnik, little cluster of white flowers. Not really that showy, but kind of interesting. It's related. It's in the same family as ivy. So if you know the flowers on English ivy, it looks like that. And then the fruits is a little cluster of little black fruits and kind of a little ball as well. But it takes a while before it starts doing that. But once it does, it can be pretty attractive. They're always expensive to find. I said because they're hard to propagate, but then after that they usually flush once a year. So you get 1 spring flush of growth, and then that's it. It's not like a plant that you can fertilize and water and keep pushing growth all year through. So boom, you get 1 shot of growth. It grows a little bit, and then next year before it grows again. So to get a saleable plant is difficult. So they're slow to propagate. This is one we'd actually like to get into tissue culture, perhaps. Talking to a group in Virginia about possibly working with some Fatsias and doing them in tissue culture, so we can get them out to a wider group. But some of these variegated ones can be a little iffy, because how you propagate them in tissue culture can vary how they actually their final appearance. I mentioned shade. It's good in shade. It can grow in sun. If you're growing some of these variegated ones in more sun, they're going to need more moisture. This one does okay in sun. Some of the ones with really white variegation, like the old variegata, which we passed walking up here, that one can really burn in sun, so that's best in some shade. The next plant is this little Liriope down here. As you go by, it's a little grassy looking plant. Actually related to lilies, not a grass at all. Liriope muscari, that's the clumping monkey grass, it's sometimes called. It's pretty common in our landscapes, Liriope muscari. There's the 2 kinds of Liriope are widely used. There's bunch species, but there's spicata, which will spread pretty aggressively. In fact, when my son gets in trouble, I have him dig more out of my yard that's been there, that we've been digging out for the last 6 years. And then there's Liriope muscari, which is a clumper. So if you're going to, if you want to edge paths with one or do something like that, you'll want Liriope muscari, because it won't run all over the place and be a real thug. But if you want to have a ground cover that really covers and spreads, Liriope spicata is the way to go. Now this is a selection called Okina, which when it emerges, the top, usually about 3/4 of the leaf, sometimes even more, will emerge and will be solid white. And then over the course of the summer, it'll become kind of more of a speckled white, and the green will kind of creep up those stems until by the end of the summer, it'll be pretty much solid green, be green all through the winter. a little bit of speckling on there, kind of a gray-green, so you can tell it's got something, but doesn't necessarily look great. Like the Farfugium, the first year in the ground, you'll get a little white dusting on the tips, and it's not going to knock your socks off. But a year or two in the ground, that's pretty nice. In late summer, you get the typical Liriope spikes of purple flowers, kind of lavender purple flowers, which are attractive. Again, this is one that you want to cut back that old foliage before the new foliage comes up, because pretty much all the foliage comes up at once. So if you wait too late and you cut all the tips off your foliage, you'll have little brown tips all summer long. But like the other Liriope, it's very tough. In full sun, you'll get some burning on this because there's so much white in there. There's just not much chlorophyll to keep it from burning. But as long as you give it a little bit of shade, you're fine. And long-lived, easy to grow. You could dig that up and divide it into a whole bunch of little pieces. So if you buy one, you know, they're often expensive, but you can divide it up into little pieces. You may have to wait a couple years before you really get that good variegation on it. Questions about this, or anybody have experiences with it that differ?
Will it spread actually?
This is a clumping one, so it'll just form a larger and larger clump, but it won't spread like Liriope spicata.
I would ask about the carpet next to you. Is that getting enough sun?
No. I mean, it's getting enough sun to live, but it's not vigorous. You know, we have another one out front, and that gets lots of sun, and it is really vigorous.
But it will stay small like that.
Yeah.
Does fertility affect the whiting of that one in the Farfugium? Like if you had it close to a lawn with high nitrogen, would that be a lot greener?
I don't know. The soils where the other Farfugium is growing are pretty rich soils. We've got Novozymes compost in there, and that's pretty high fertility, and it hasn't really affected it so far. But I don't know about this. It's a good question. Ted, do you know if that would affect it?
You get more growth, but I don't know that it would affect variegation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a genetic thing, just the chlorophyll isn't showing up.
So I've heard that with the Aspidistra, the Ashii, if that's the cultivar name, yeah, and I have Fatsia spiderweb, and I have them in pots, and I fertilize them, and
Fatsia spiderweb will not be variegated with high fertility.
Yeah.
That's a little bit different mechanism, so I don't know.
Just curious.
Yeah, but that's a good question. It'd be interesting to try it. Grow some in different pots.
Give me a division.
That's what you're asking.
No. Well, he did give us permission to dig it. He said, I got it recorded even. He said, you can dig it and divide it.
Oh, he did say that, yes.
No.
That's hypothetical.
Hypothetical. If one were to. This is Impatiens omeiana silver pink. We have several Impatiens omeiana. We have one over there, just the species. Right behind y'all, we have another one. But this one, I really like silver pink. I like them all. This is a perennial Impatiens. It will come back every year for you, pretty reliably. It's also a spreading Impatiens. It will spread vigorously. I know people who hate this plant because it will spread so vigorously. It doesn't bother me because it's such a fleshy plant that it just doesn't like overrun other plants. They can grow up through it. It doesn't outcompete other plants. It just kind of weaves its way around them. But if you look at it, you can see this is the original clump over here, but it's popping up over here and popping up back here. So it does spread pretty well. All Impatiens omeiana are nice because when they come up, the leaves kind of unroll, and they usually always have a nice dark backside to the leaf. Just even the straight species, when it unrolls that dark side, so you see that dark, you see the green from the inside, and then in the species, the midrib is usually kind of a light color, so you get almost a tricolor effect. This silver pink has little hairs all over the leaves, little scale like hairs that really reflect light. So if you come up and look at it, it looks like shimmers with that silver, and then you have the deep burgundy pink veins on there and the pink stems on the new growth. So really attractive. As an Impatiens, it really wants shade. It must have shade. It will burn to a crisp quickly in full sun. And it really wants damp soils. In fact, our soils here are so well drained that you can see this is wilting a little bit. And tomorrow it's going to wilt a lot if we don't get have some more water put in here. The soil, even though the soil has some moisture, it's so well drained that it is already wilting. Now in this soil, it'll pop back up because there is some moisture there. But if it dries out, it can just fry. But a beautiful little plant. It'll form little Impatiens flowers, long, kind of broadly spurred flowers that hang a little bit under the foliage in late summer. They're kind of salmony to mustardy yellow colored. Kind of interesting. They're not super showy because they're under the foliage a little bit, like a lot of Impatiens species, but really nice. And in a damp woodland garden, this is beautiful. It just kind of creeps around and pops up here and there, and over time kind of migrates a little bit. The original clump kind of dies out, but it has moved into other places. So you get these really great combinations on its own. I'm not a good designer, so my plants have to kind of find their own combinations that are nice. So this was one that'll do that. Any questions?
There's a fungus that's attacking Impatiens in the area. It doesn't bother these?
There is a fungus that attacks the Impatiens that's pretty bad. In fact, if you go to the garden centers, you're not finding the annual Impatiens for sale. You know, I don't know how it's going to affect the perennial Impatiens. We don't mix them up. So since we don't have a lot of the annual Impatiens, we haven't had those planted around here, hoping that we're not going to have the fungal problems here. This is not a substitute for the annual Impatiens. You know, those are all about the flowers, or for the most part those are. This is really more about the foliage and the texture than the flowers. So if you're not planting them in the same spot, you should be okay.
But these do get flowers.
These do get flowers, but they're held kind of under the foliage. All right, the next plant is one that's called Russian comfrey a lot of times. It's a Symphytum. Symphytum Atlanticum Axminster gold. It's in the same family. It's in the borage family. So same family as forget-me-nots and pulmonaria, bluebells, that kind of thing. And so it has that same sort of flower, these little flowers that dangle down a little bit. In just the straight species, they tend to be kind of lavender blue, but in this variegated one, they're kind of a pale pink. I've heard it called mauve, but if you look at them, that's not too mauve to me. That's pretty pale. But really brightly variegated plant. Broad gold edge to the kind of gray-green leaves. It'll grow as a rosette with these great big leaves, and then when it flowers in late spring to early summer, the flower stalks can get up to 4 feet tall and have loads of these little flowers on there. And once they finish flowering, the stalks will start looking back. You just cut them back, and those rosettes, the rosette at the bottom will cover it. Really a pretty striking plant. Didn't flower for us last year, but just that foliage looked fantastic. And great big leaves on the rosette. The basal leaves can be 18 inches long and 8 inches wide, and it really looks like the kind of plant that would just fry, just burn up. It's the kind of thing. Axminster. When I saw it, I figured, okay, Axminster gold. That sounds like something British. It's growing in the cool UK climate. You bring it out here, you put it in, real summer temperatures, and it's just gonna turn crispy. And it didn't. It looked great all summer long. Kind of retreats back underground mostly during the winter, and then comes back out early. Little semi-evergreen for that rosette, but really it's been a showy plant. I think we are going to need some shade on it. I think in full sun it would burn a little bit more, but I haven't grown it in full sun, so I may be wrong, but I think it'd prefer a little bit of shade. There have been a lot of variegated butterfly bush that have come on the market, and most of them have not been very good. plants that you cut back hard and that grow vigorously are often unstable. Variegated ones are often unstable variegated. We're finding this one, Summer Skies, to be a exceptionally stable, very good growing plant. It's a big honking Buddleia. The trend has been to breed these little tiny guys. We've been, we've been as part of that. The Arboretum and NC State breeder Denny Werner has bred these little, Blue Chip and Miss Ruby and all these little dwarf compact guys. This thing, it is not dwarf. He gets big. This season already, it's put up 4 feet of growth, and it'll put on another 4 feet before the season's over. Great big leaves once it gets mature, and really nice variegation. Comes out with kind of a yellowish edge to the leaves with a gray-green center, and then goes to almost kind of a creamy white edge with time. And you get a little bit of grays and greens down the center. Really, really showy, really bright. Think of it in a mixed border or something like that. It's going to pop, especially with dark plants in the background. Flowers like a typical butterfly bush. You get those, you get lavender spikes of flowers. Not a real deep flower color. What I'm waiting for is when we get the deep purple flowers of like opera or black knight or something like that on this Buddleia. Man, that'll really be something. But still, they're nice and they attract butterflies. Buddleia are pretty deer resistant. It's drought tolerant. Doesn't burn in the full sun. This gets pretty blazing hot sun. Not a lot of water. We irrigate some over here, but this is kind of tucked in a corner, so it doesn't get a whole lot. And it hasn't missed a beat for us. It's really kept going and going and going. And when it does, when we do get some marginal variegation, it tends to be where the entire leaf is variegated, not where the entire leaf is green. So it's really been a good performer for us. So if you got room, it's a good one to look for.
Is this sort of a fragrance?
Pardon?
Fragrance?
It's got that typical Buddleia fragrance, which some people find very strong and very nice. I can barely smell it at all. There's a few that are more fragrant than others, but this is probably about average fragrance. But I'm a terrible person to ask that.
Does it like to spread?
Pardon?
Does it like to spread?
Does it like to spread? You mean by seed? I haven't read anything that this Buddleia has been bred for sterility. A lot of the new ones, the Flutterby series, the Lo and Behold series, a lot of those are bred for sterility or exceptionally low fertility. I don't know for sure about this one. I would think not. It is a hybrid, so there is potential that there is some sterility in it, but I don't know that one way or another.
Mark, what's it look like in wintertime?
In wintertime, it's a deciduous shrub. We cut our Buddleia back down pretty hard during the winter.
Okay.
Buddleias are pretty weak-rooted, so if you have those tops up high, they can blow around a lot during the winter and you can have some problems. Probably wouldn't be a problem here where it's kind of protected, but we cut them all back so they grow up. But you can grow Buddleia as a tree. If you want to stake it and trim it up to a single trunk, you can grow them as like a little patio tree if you like. The question was about this hydrangea out here in the hot sun, and does it wilt in the hot sun? And the answer is yes. It wilts terribly in the hot sun.
I say mine do. I wondered what your secret was.
No secret. Water. If you water it plenty, it doesn't. But it would look better in some shade. You'd have darker green foliage. This is one that's a hybrid between Hydrangea serrata and Hydrangea macrophylla. So it's a little more sun tolerant. The Hydrangea serratas are a little more sun tolerant. Not a lot, but a little bit.
If we were interested in purchasing one of those Buddleias, where would you suggest we go?
I think these should be pretty widely available now. Not all over the place, but I know Tony sells it. Plant Delights. I know, and I always say it because I'm out there chatting with him more, and we've talked about how good this is. So I know he has it. But I think some of the better nurseries, I think Greenleaf is growing it, so it should be available to any good nursery in the area. because greenleaf is growing it here in North Carolina.
So why do they breed them to be sterile?
They breed them to be sterile because there's a problem in some area. In England, there's a serious problem. In Europe, there's a serious problem with them seeding around. In the West Coast, they're actually, the non-sterile ones are illegal in Oregon. They're banned in Oregon. Here, it's not, the seeding around has not been a problem, but it could at some point. You know, I don't know, but they have become a problem in some areas of the country.
Do they need full
If you do, the question was, do they need full sun? If you could plant this in part shade, and you would have a beautiful variegated plant, it would tend to be a little more open, a little looser plant. It would not flower as heavily, but it'd be a nice variegated plant. I mean, the flowers are pretty pale lavender. You got to kind of get up on them to see them because the foliage really takes over visually. Other questions?
When you cut them back, how long do you
when we cut them back, we do them pretty low. We usually do them down to about 10 inches or so. Typically, you do them in between 24 and 10 inches is about the range. I feel like if you do them up higher, you get a lot of the growth at the top, and sometimes they can look a little leggy at the bottom. But since we cut them back so hard, we get a lot of flush really down low. When? Once they're dormant, it doesn't really matter. Once they've gone dormant, you can do it any time between late fall to just before growth comes out. In fact, some people wait until growth starts coming out and then cut them back hard. I don't. Okay, Styrax japonicus early light. This thing is cool.
Sorry.
This is a brand new purple leaf of Styrax. There is another purple leaf one called Purple Dress that is not very purple, and it's kind of a matte leaf, whereas this has a real glossy leaf which really catches the light. I'm thinking it's looking this good this year because we've had a really nice cool spring. A lot of these purple leaf plants in the southeast, once it gets warm, they go to green pretty quickly, the red buds and things like that. So in a typical year, this may already be green, but I'm pretty excited about how this looks right now. It is going to get green. I'm certain of that. It's a new plant. We haven't had it for very long, but I'm pretty certain that it's going to go to that kind of muddy green that we get with a lot of the purple leaf plants. But it is spectacular. So it comes out with this purple foliage, and it should do that any year. It'll come out, the new growth will be purple. And last year, the new growth, even during the heat of the summer, it would come out purple and go to green pretty quickly. So you get that little bits of color kind of on the outside. Even this young plant has started flowering. Really nice flowers. They're the typical white snowbell flowers, little 4-petaled flowers with a little central mass of yellow stamens in there. Really like the pedicels or the flower stalk, which is a really nice burgundy. Looks great against that flower. Flowers look great against that foliage. Once this plant gets a little bit larger, it'll really look good. This is, according to reports, this is a very compact grower. It should stay really tight and dense. I've seen reports 6 feet tall. I would guarantee it's going to get bigger than 6 feet tall, especially here in the southeast where things tend to grow pretty big with our long growing seasons. So I'm thinking it's going to get bigger, but you can see it's got pretty tight growth, so it is a pretty slow grower. It is going to stay pretty dense, but really a nice plant. These are grafted. Some Styrax root in small percentages. Some are very difficult to root. When you do root them, they're often very difficult to get them to come back out the next season. Typically, what you need to do is you need to root them and then really force them into good growth before winter time. If you don't do that, then you can have a great plant, great roots on it, and it just never comes out in the following winter. Often you'll get kind of 0% coming out in the winter. Well, on some do pretty easily. I don't know how this grows on its own roots. I think pretty much everything is grafted at this point. But really nice plant. We just got it, so don't know a lot about it. It's a pretty new plant out there. Questions?
In the nurseries, not there yet, huh?
Not there in any numbers. When we got this plant, we were at a wholesale nursery. He had just gotten in, I think he'd gotten in 50 from the West Coast. It was all he could get. I think he was paying, there was a 2-gallon plant. I think he was paying something like 50 or 60 bucks for a wholesale plant.
Yeah.
You know, so it's expensive, it's in small numbers, and
we'll wait a few years.
Yeah, so you may need to wait a few years. I know Broken Arrow Nursery is a mail order nursery that's selling it now. I think they had it for $60. I don't know what size they were, but Broken Arrow Nurseries up out of Connecticut. Is that right? Is that right, Ted? You know Richard James at Broken Arrow?
Oh, yeah.
They do a lot of mountain laurels, but they do have it. Okay. Next plant is this Cryptomeria, this Japanese cedar. It's one called Sekkan, and it emerges with gold. And I did this, like I said, because I've been talking about a lot of small plants, a lot of mushy herbaceous stuff. So I wanted to talk about one real tree. The Cryptomerias are great plants for our area. They do very well. If you're looking for a conifer, they're fantastic. You can get little dwarf ones, you can get big ones. This is often in the trade as Sekkan Sugi, Cryptomeria japonica Sekkan Sugi. Sugi is just the Japanese name for Cryptomeria, so it's not really a valid part of the name. But you'll see it more often that way. It emerges with really bright gold new growth, which looks great against that dark evergreen foliage, and then it fades to green over the course of the summer. But you get this really nice blast of gold spring color, which can be quite attractive. I think there may be 2 clones in the market. A lot of what you see nowadays is a shrubbier plant that tends to grow multi-stemmed. This is one that stays as a single trunk plant, and you can find this as well, and even the shrubbier ones you can kind of force to grow as a single trunk. But it is slow growing. This has been here for a while. Not quite sure how old this is. We didn't have it in our records, but it's been growing here for a pretty good long while. Just makes a neat kind of accent piece, and usually when you get the size of plants, they're usually talking about a 10-year size, and in 10 years, Sekkan usually is going to grow to about 12 feet or so tall. So really a more mid-size conifer, not one that's gonna really grow quickly out of your space.
How much shade does it tolerate?
How much shade does it tolerate? That's a great question. Cryptomerias will tolerate a pretty fair amount of shade. They'll tend to be a little more loose and open and more shade. You can see there was a hedge here. You can see it was suffering where it was growing together, but that was more from competition than from the actual shade. Ones like this Sekkan, with the gold new growth, will not come out nearly so gold in the shade. It'll tend to be just kind of a pale green when it emerges and going darker green. So you do get better color in more sun.
Do they always grow with the very straight trunk?
No, that's what I was saying. There seems to be 2 clones. One of the clone that you see a lot is more of a multi-stemmed plant, and Sekkan can kind of grow either way. I think really when Sekkan was brought in multiple times from Japan, and it's really just a generic, originally in Japan, just a generic name for one that flushes gold. And so there's more than one clone that's kind of floating around that they all flush gold, but then they go green. All right, last plant. We don't even have to go anywhere. It's just right here around the corner. This is a wonderful, wonderful honeysuckle. Honeysuckles have gotten kind of a bad rep. You have the shrubby honeysuckles, which in you know, the Midwest, Chicago area, those kind of places, it's just taken over. They seed all over the place, really weedy. Then you've got the Japanese honeysuckles around here, which go rampant and grow everywhere and take over. Yeah, that's the honeysuckle. Most people, if you ask about the native honeysuckle, they think it's the Japanese honeysuckle with those white flowers that fade to yellow, whereas really our native honeysuckle is a red flowered one. This one is Lonicera Mandarin. It is a vining honeysuckle. Not exceptionally vigorous, but nicely so. Will grow to about 18 to 20 feet tall if you give it enough structure, but you can prune it back in the winter and keep it smaller if you want. It was bred at, I think, the University of Washington in the late 80s, maybe 86, 89, something like that. And as a hybrid, this particular one is sterile, which some people actually complained about because Lonicera fruit are kind of translucent red fruits. This one will never form those fruits because it is sterile. But you get these great orange flowers, kind of a darker orange on the lip and down the throat, and paler orange on the outside. Really nice, long, almost 3 inches long. Hummingbirds do come after them quite a bit. Really a showy plant, and will tend to flower kind of on and off all season long. Really at its heaviest right now, but then continuing through the season. Really an attractive plant. Great for growing up into a tree or on an arbor pergola like this. Very, very nice plant.
How much sun does it need?
If you want to get good flowers, it needs to get pretty good sun.
Okay.
Does it have that smell that honeysuckles do?
Not much, no. Certainly not like the Japanese honeysuckle or the shrubby fragrant honeysuckles. Other questions? All right, well, thanks for coming out. I do hope y'all get around and are able to really explore the rest of Arboretum. And I do want to point out, since we're out here, that you got to come up and see our dragon here. This was designed and constructed by NC State Horticulture Science design class. This is a student project, and it is amazing what they put together out here. So you got to get around and see it from the front if you didn't really look at it coming out of the Laugh House, because it is pretty cool. So thanks for coming out and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Mark.